Hey guys, Brent Hull Build Show, talking today about the period revival style, right? Why I love the pre-1940 houses more than houses today. We're going to study this era, right? Because there's a lot of period revival houses still being built today. I don't think they're as good as they were done in the 1920s. I'm going to show you why today on the Build Show. Okay guys, so we're talking about period revival. Okay, this is an era from 1920 to 1940. It is a revival of what, right? It's a revival of architectural styles like French, colonial, Mediterranean, Spanish. You'll see a bunch of these revivals of style. Now, when does this happen? Remember, we've studied the Victorian, we studied the arts and crafts. This is right after the arts and crafts, right? Arts and crafts is maybe the first modern movement. The period revival era happens during kind of a unique period of time, right? It's between world wars. America turns 150 years old in 1926. It's no wonder the colonial revival is really important in that era. Look at these American Builder magazines, right? 1927, a little colonial revival house. 1927, that's May, this is September. More of a Tudor style house, right? You look at the building developer magazines, what the developers were building. This is 1929, little English style house, colonial style house. All these things were really popular in that era. Now, I like to study this era because we're still building period revival houses today. And I find that there is a huge depository of great resources in the 1920s on these period styles. Now, another thing that happens is you guys will send me, how can I get good house plans today? How can I get good details? Now, one of these or a couple of these, this is a Dover publication. It's a reprint. Now, this is Authentic Small Houses of the 20s. I think the real title of it was Small Houses of Distinction, and you'll see these different house styles in here, beautifully rendered. Interestingly, this was put together by the Small Houses Bureau, okay, which was actually commissioned by the AIA in 1920, okay? So it says the Architects Small House Service Bureau is the only public service of its kind. Basically, the reason they started doing this is because most people can't or didn't afford an architect at that time, yet they still wanted good plans. And this was a collection of good architects who had built or designed small houses and made them available to everybody. So this is a great resource for architecturally designed small houses and a great starting point for getting good design and good details. Another one, The Book of 1,000 Houses. Henry Atterbury Smith, it was the editor. He was a famous architect. Great pictures of very charming houses. Now, what makes them charming? The details, right? It's all in the details. So there were a number of books and a number of things available at that time that made this style really great. I've talked to you about the White Pine series. That whole book series I did for fine home building, the books every builder should own. One of those things was the White Pine series. And these were little monographs that were put out in the 1920s by the White Pine Association, where they would go back and look at historic details. Now, they would look at these houses and they'd look at, for this one, it was emphasizing shutters and was showing great details for how to do proper shutters today. You ever heard that term Xerox of a Xerox of a Xerox? That by the time you get to the third or fourth one, it kind of looks fuzzy and faint. You can't really tell what it is. That's kind of what's happened to building today, okay? In that we copy these details, we think we saw that here, and all of a sudden our houses just aren't very good. Well, these resources were going back to the original source, okay? The original colonial houses in Charleston and New England, looking at the authentic details, okay? Another one was called the Tuileries brochures, and these were all of houses in England and in Europe, right? So here's some details of some timber frame things. These were roof, clay tile things, right? So that you can get authentic details. I've always told you guys, you got to be working on your library. You got to be working on building this resource so that you can build better. Here's a couple of books that you should own. If you're looking into the Spanish revival and the Mediterranean revival, this one, Rexford Newcomb, 1930, I believe, is a collection of pictures and details of authentic Mediterranean style houses, okay? Ironwork, entries, all the different things that would make an authentic Spanish revival house, all part of that area. The colonial interiors. I've shown you guys this book before. There was a 3-part series. This one's Federal and Greek Revival. All details on the inside of a house as opposed to studying the outside of them. The reason I like the period revival era, remember on my video on mastery and how to become a master, part of what happened when I was studying in Boston and moved back to Fort Worth, I had to reorient the styles and what I understood and what I knew. Most of our housing stock is arts and crafts, bungalow houses, as well as period revival houses. So we have a huge historic housing stock from 1900 to 1940 that I really needed to understand. So understanding period revival, French, English, Mediterranean, colonial, those revival styles and getting those details right is hugely important. And one of the things that we do as a builder is we do a lot of infill building, where you have to build a new house in an historic neighborhood, okay? And in order to do that, sometimes with landmarks commissions, historic boards and things like that, you really have to get the details right. You really have to know how you're building so that you can put these together right. That's why I want you to dig into the details, right, of these different styles. They have a language, they have a style that really will, if you can get them right, okay, and if you can build your library of these primary sources from the 1920s, you will begin to get your details right. You'll begin to hang shutters on the house like they were originally hung instead of screwing them to the wall, right? Just all these little things that will help you build better. Last little book, if you're a geek like me who likes historic houses, there is this thing called the Home Builder's Catalog, okay? There was 3 editions. This is 1927. I think there was a 28 and a 29. There wasn't a 1930, wonder why. But this was kind of a suites catalog for old houses at that time. I used this book to study historic houses. For instance, sash cords and the different kind of sash cords. These are furnaces and the different kind of furnaces in a house. I still find details that are in these books in historic houses, okay? And if you really want to know how a house was heated in the 1920s, the furnaces and how all that system was in there. If you want to know the original millwork, the original cabinets, all the different things that went into an historic house, this is an encyclopedia, okay? This is Google for you guys, looking back at those houses and trying to figure out how they built. Okay, so how do you build better, right? How do you get better at what you do? You have to really study the past, in my mind. You have to be a student of these houses. So if you want to remodel a house from the 1920s, you really need to study the moldings, the scale of the rooms, how those houses were put together so that your addition on this house looks appropriate, doesn't look like a big shoebox on the back of this pretty house, right? Your details will be more authentic and you will build better houses if you understand these details. All right, guys, so period revival style, right? That whole period from 1920 to 1940, Spanish revival, French revival, English revival, colonial revival, right? A revival of those architectural styles that everybody's loved, that are so beautiful. Those are still styles that are copied and practiced today. If you can study the past, you will build better details today. Be sure to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. We do a lot of behind the scenes about books like this, about resources so that you guys can build better. Also sign up for the newsletter. I'm Brent Hull. Thanks for watching.